Good evening to all our viewers out there on Dave TV, Alliance and the Move. Once again, we are live in the studio, and my name is Derek Basdale, AFC, Assistant General Secretary. Brothers and sisters out there, we are very lucky, and I'm privileged to be alongside our AFC leader, Nigel Hughes, in the studio. You will hear from him about the wealth of our country, education, cash grants, which is a big one, and no other person can deliver and tell you than Mr. Nigel Hughes, AFC leader. Mr. Nigel Hughes.
Good night, Derek. Thank you so much for having me here. Good night to the people of DTV. I appreciate your graciousness and your continued commitment to having us host this program here. So, Derek, your first question.
Well, my first question to you, I want you to start off with this country, with oil and gas,
Sure.
and the wealth that is generated. And we want to hear it from you, Nigel, what you have to say, because you're a very learned individual,
No.
not only in the political arena, but also as an attorney at law. And the station is yours tonight.
Okay, so, Derek, I want to first of all share with the people in Berbice the scale of the wealth that Guyana has, so that you can actually put it in perspective. So Guyana is making, at the moment, $65 million per hour. 65 million Guyana dollars per hour. Just think about that. That means every day, Guyana makes, off of oil and gas alone, oil, we're not doing gas yet, we're making $1.6 billion a day. That is a phenomenal amount of money. And for the first time in the history of this country, do we have the resources to be able to develop all the potential that we have, all the dreams of our foreparents, whether it's Chetty Jagan, whether it's Forbes Burnham, whether it's Walter Rodney, all the dreams and aspirations of our parents, we have an opportunity by virtue of access to this wealth to be able to achieve them. This will, however, require planning. It will, however, require very careful planning. It will require also that we are responsible in the way in which we manage these resources. As you know, from independence, we have never had this level of wealth. It was only at the end of 2019 that we started to generate this wealth. So we don't have the experience of managing huge sums of money. And you know what happens if you try to do things in which you don't have the expertise. You're going to make mistakes. And you're going to make very expensive mistakes. And one of the key things that we have been saying over and over is that the wealth that we have that goes into that natural resource fund needs to be properly managed by money experts, money manager experts. Right now, what is happening, for example, that money goes into the federal account in the United States of America, where it generates probably somewhere between 5 and 6%. Most of the money managers in the world will say to you, with very little risk, you can take that money and generate a minimum of 10% per annum. Now, 10% per annum on $1 billion is $100 million. We had $1 billion in the Natural Resource Fund last year. We emptied that completely. So far for this year, we're somewhere north of $3 billion. So think about if you had $4 billion, which you didn't just leave in that very low interest bearing account in the United States of America, but you hired professional money managers and gave them very conservative parameters to manage that money at a low return of 10%, you would be generating $400 million. Now, $400 million, if you have the right experts planning, you can actually fund your development from the interest you receive from that investment or from the returns. what we have been doing is we have been now just spending, we go and we plunder, we raid, on the assumption that this money will continue to come at the rate at which it is coming. So we have a couple of very fundamental, important things that we want to share with you. One of them is this. No responsible government, especially one that has had the history that we have had in Guyana, is going to go forward unless you have long-term plans, not only for investment, but you have long-term plans about how you are going to develop the country. So we think that there are 5 key areas in which we must have a minimum of a 15-year plan. And those 5 areas are, first of all, the economy. We need a 15-year plan for that. The most critical aspect of development in the future is education. We believe you should have a 15-year plan for health, 15-year plan for foreign affairs, because we have 2 difficult borders. We have problems on our western border with Venezuela, and we have an unresolved problem on the east with the New River Triangle with Suriname. And the last 15-year plan is reduction of poverty. These are critical. And if we're talking about building a new Guyana, and I prefer to think about it in terms of a new republic, the reason why we say it's a minimum of 15 years is that we believe that all the political parties, the People's Progressive Party, the People's National Congress, Reform, the Alliance for Change, APNU, all the other parties, we should get together and agree the broad principles for these 15 years. So every time we elect a new government at elections, so we change government next year, we change government again in 2030, and we change government in 2035, you don't have these huge swings in policies, and you don't have governments that go in and they suddenly decide that they're not pursuing the same policy in education, or they're not pursuing the same policy in economic development. Most people know that when you're planning, especially when you buy a house, the minimum mortgage you have is 20, 30 years. And that's called long-term planning. We have to be responsible. If you think of our 4 parents who came here, all of them in difficult circumstances, unless they had a vision and had a long-term plan, then they wouldn't have seen the success they've seen. So we say we have to agree with this, and we have to become mature enough as politicians to agree across the board. And where we don't agree, we have to have a basis upon which we can disagree civilly. And we believe that plan must be driven by data. It must be driven by rhetoric or emotion. Oh, I feel that this guy wants to do this because he wants to do X, Y, and Z. And so that is particularly important. And what we have today, and that's why I said education is important, is that we have, right now, 48% of the children of this country who enter secondary school are not finishing. That's a frightening number. In Region 9, this year, only 6% of the students who spent 5 years in school matriculated. Just think about that. That means 94% of those people in Region 9 who went to school for 5 years come out with no degree, no certification, no certificates. And therefore we have to look at what the new economy wants in Guyana. What are the requirements for new economy? So we know the new economy is definitely going to be driven by oil and gas. And we know that at the minimum, that perhaps has a life of somewhere between 50 to 20 years for certain, before perhaps it wanes, but at the minimum. And we look therefore to see what sort of jobs will the oil and gas industry generate. And the International Labor Organization says skilled and semi-skilled jobs are the jobs that will be created by the new oil and gas economy. If we are losing 50% of our students who are not finishing school, and then when we look at the pass rates, 31% in mathematics for this year, it means that our children in Guyana are not going to be qualified for the jobs that the new economy in Guyana is creating. And that's a problem, because it means that somebody else has to fill those jobs. The oil industry is not an industry that shuts down overnight. It runs 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So those jobs have to be filled, not may be filled, they have to be filled. And if our young people are not being qualified to fill them, then they're going to be filled by people outside of Guyana. That's okay. We are a responsible nation, and we welcome foreign assistance as much as we can. But we have to have a policy in migration, and I'll come to that later on. But we need to have a program right now that captures those 50% that are not finishing secondary school. We put them in a training program that allows them to be trained in relevant industries. So if it is offshore welding, if it is scaffolding, if it is offshore electrical work, we look at exactly where those jobs are going to be created, and we provide the courses and the certification for those young people, whether it takes 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, whatever period, and then we acknowledge that during that period of time, a lot of them will not generate income because they're being trained. And so we must pay them a livable stipend that allows them to go and get trained, get taught, get certified, so that they can provide for their families during this period of training. And then when they're finished, they have certification that will give them the opportunity, if they want to establish their own business in welding and offshore welding, they're free to do that. If they want to apply for a job in the oil and gas industry, they have the qualifications. And if we put in place at the time a policy that says, once you have qualified Guyanese in these areas for development, they get priority over anybody else from outside of Guyana, then we begin to develop and craft a future for Guyanese that gives them an edge. Now, that's not what's happening now, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on why it is not happening. We want to talk about the new Republic of Guyana and how we get there. So that's one of the things in education. Two, the World Health Organization, I think about two years ago, produced some really frightening statistics. They said 20% of the children who go to school in Guyana are in extreme food poverty. 20%. This is not a government of Guyana figure. This is not an Alliance for Change figure. It's not a People's National Congress figure. It's the World Health Organization and UNICEF. Now, that's a pretty frightening position to be in. If 20% of your children in 2022, and this is after we found oil, this is after we were one of the fastest developing economies in the world, is in extreme food poverty, what that means is on any daily basis, they are not getting the minimum requirements for nutrition, and perhaps are not getting enough meals on a daily basis. Now, if you think that figure is startling, 40% of our children, according to the same report, are in food poverty. We cannot possibly be in a country that is earning $1.6 billion a day and have any of our children in food poverty. None. It means that we must have priority areas dedicated to removing that food poverty in the shortest possible time. So there must be a program immediately, and should have been developed a long time ago, to provide those meals for those children so that we don't have anybody in food poverty. You can't possibly be on paper as wealthy as we are and have children in food poverty. That is completely unacceptable. There are some other statistics that are pretty startling. Now, I spoke about the food poverty, spoke about extreme food poverty, and I've touched a little bit on education. I want to come to the rule of law and law and order. Investor confidence in any country is critical for the development of your economy. No country develops by purely domestic investment. Doesn't happen. China with its huge market, India, huge market, all of them developed to the superpower status that they currently enjoy by virtue of being countries and destinations for foreign investment. One of the most important aspects of foreign investment in any country is the rule of law and the confidence of the investor that their investment in the country will be protected. Now, I just want to go to law and order, which is a little different from rule of law, but we'll go there. The Guyana Police Force is now embroiled and has been embroiled for the longest possible time with the most awful scandal, one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. And all that can do is reduce the confidence not only of the citizens, but those of our guests or guest investors who are in the country who believe that, we have a police force that is capable of maintaining law and order and that is beyond reproach and that people have confidence in. How can you possibly have these scandals, and the latest is no exception? And we want to talk about seriously having people come and invest in Guyana. On the rule of law aspect, if you think about it, people look on at how we behave. They look on at our policies. And this week has been no exception to us embarrassing ourselves. We have the president addressing the National Assembly, which is a rare event. And the president announces very clearly in the National Assembly that he's going to give $200,000 to each household. You would expect from a modern, rapidly developing country like ours that before the president makes any announcement, even if he's at a press conference, that whatever he does say is well researched and is a fixed position upon which you can rely. The president goes to our highest legislative forum, the National Assembly, and says, look, we're going to give $200,000 a household. As a basic requirement, anybody listening to that would assume that there would have been a clear definition of household, what it meant, and also that there is some procedure by which people who didn't fit the description, if they felt aggrieved, or even if they did fit the description, that they had a grievance mechanism. So if somebody came to a yard and there were 3 families in 2 households and the person distributing the money said, look, I only see 1 household, there must be some grievance procedure by which that person can go through a legally established channel to say, these people came, they were biased, or they didn't follow the rules, and I didn't get. Lo and behold, we hear that there was no definition of a household. We know that culturally in Guyana, for many reasons, across all ethnic groups, more than one households literally live in one building. And so, more than one family, live in one building. And so what happens is that for various reasons, young people just can't afford to go on their own, or it makes sense to still live by your parents or build somebody else. If that's a single household, and you got between your parents and yourself 8 people, that's $200,000 into 8. The point is, one would have expected before the president made that announcement, there were plans in place, certainly at a minimum, a definition of household. And lo and behold, within 24 to 36 hours, we hear from the president and the vice president that, by the way, we're not doing households anymore. We've gone to an individual, which is something we'd spoken about before, but we're not here to score political points. And you move 36 hours to an individual. Now, if you were looking on at this country, you think, well, something got to be odd here. The president comes to the National Assembly, rare event, makes this great pronouncement, and then the next day he literally changes and says, okay, no longer a household. And somebody says, well, household, is a nebulous concept. And they go to $100,000 per individual. We can discuss the benefits of that separately, but the point is the impact that has internationally is that people think you're not serious. You're not a serious country. You can't have your head of state making these statements and almost changing, not almost, changing them the next day. And so when we come to the rule of law, and we really want to talk about the new Guyana, the new Republic of Guyana, we have to make sure that we have in place, first of all, the best possible judiciary available to us. And I will say we have a good judiciary, talented, bright young people. But we need, if we are going to match our rapid economic development, once we manage that well, with a concomitant judiciary, we have to start looking for foreign judges to sit on our bench. What is going to happen to the country is that people are going to begin to specialize in particular areas. People are going to specialize, as they're doing now, in oil and gas, but they're also going to specialize in terms of finance. So we're going to need specialist judges with specialist knowledge in certain areas. Most international contracts have arbitration clauses. So amongst the lawyers, we're going to have specialists. We don't have the history, we don't have the depth, either at the bar, in the lawyers, or in the bench. So in planning for the future for the rule of law, especially for people who want to invest in Guyana, not the carpetbaggers who are running in to try and make a profit in 2 years and leave, the long-term investors, we have to have the kind of judiciary that people have global respect for. And that way we have to expand the source from which we hire our judges. It's not unusual in the Caribbean. Belize has had one of its most successful Chief Justices, Justice Conte, who actually came from, I think Justice Conte came from Ghana or Sierra Leone. Belize has had Chief Justices from Guyana. The present head of the law faculty in the University of Guyana was the Chief Justice of Belize, and the current Chief Justice of Belize, Madam Justice Louise Blenman, is a Guyanese. So we have to reach the stage where we are attracting the best and the brightest in the region, in the Commonwealth, who can come and sit in our bench. And we're not losing anything nationally. This is not a matter of national pride. It is a matter of reality. We are just not producing, because if we want to talk about the future. Now let's come down to what we're going to do individually for the citizen of Guyana. With the wealth we have, that wealth has to be felt by every single citizen in reality. Whether you're a pensioner or whether you're a child just born, you must have the benefit of the economic advantage that we have been given. And there are different schemes by which this can be done. One of the schemes that Brazil has adopted, called a family, and I may mispronounce it, family Bolsonaro or something like that. They have a program in which they say to young people in Brazil, especially young mothers, we will give you a special cash allocation, but we're not just giving it to you, you have certain compliances and obligations that you have to reach. So for example, when you start, they weigh your child, they look at punctuality of your child at school, attendance of your child at school, they look at your child's performance in school, and you have to maintain those minimum criteria before you get the cash grant. So that encourages those young parents who want to be able to get the benefit of this support from the state to make sure that their children are nutritiously fed, that their children get to school on time, that their children are educated, and that you look at their performance at the end. So this is not just a gift of cash, this is a grant by the state, but it has obligations. And we have to do that in several areas. You can do that in primary, you can do that in secondary, you can do that at the University of Guyana. It is that kind of creative thinking that we have to bring to bear in how we actually develop citizens who are going to be able to benefit from this wealth, and we create an incentive regime for those persons to make better Guyanese. When we come to issues like business, the cost of capital in Guyana is very expensive. You go to the bank, you're probably borrowing somewhere between 11 and 12%. A lot of the people who are coming into the country, if they're borrowing money in Trinidad, for example, they're somewhere between 6 and 7%. If they're borrowing money elsewhere, they're probably a lot lower. So our business people, to begin with, started at a disadvantage. If you borrow money to establish a business and you're paying 12% to the bank, and somebody who is competing in the same business who's come from overseas and they're paying 6%, they already have a 6-point advantage on you. So it means that our business community, which is perhaps one of the most important elements for development in Guyana, starts at a disadvantage. If you're a young person and you have a great idea that is going to generate money, where are you going to go get it? The current regime says you got to have transport land, you got to lodge a whole set of security for the bank, which is already making tons of money. And then the process is extremely long. We need a junior stock exchange where if you've got a great idea that is marketable, that looks like it's going to make money, you can actually go to somebody that creates the business plan, and you can actually put that idea, create a little company, put it on the junior stock exchange, and raise money. People will invest. Any investor looking at it says, yeah, I am prepared to spend a little $5, $6, $7 million if you developed a program, if you developed a code that was going to do something, you developed an app, and that app turns out to be, like WhatsApp or any of the other apps that we use every day, TikTok or one of them, there you go. You get the capital. Apart from that, the state has to be able to make financing and financial advice to young people who want to go into business. And we have to give them the training. We have to make them financially literate. Because some people have great ideas, but they're not familiar with how you set up the business structure and how you manage that business going forward so that it's successful. And so all of these programs have to feed into the new Republic of Guyana. This is what the state has to do, given that we have the resources. Now, I just want to show you, we started commercial production December 2019, and now we are in October 2024, and now we're talking for the first time about cash grant transfers. Now, cash grant transfers, like anything else, can be left to a minister or the president. Because otherwise the political class, and we know how the politicians behave. You know how we behave. The history of the behavior of politicians in Guyana has always been, we got to give you something if you are going to make sure you always support me. So one of the things that the Alliance for Change says is, look, let's get rid of the political influence. Let us pass a law that says, look, let's pick a commission of the best and brightest economists in the world, of course heavily favored in terms of Guyana, and let them decide how much money the country can afford to give as a direct cash transfer. So if we have a fantastic year, so for example during the first Ukraine war, what happened then is the oil price went up higher than we had expected. So we got a whole bonanza. Now that bonanza, if the economists said, look, this was not anticipated, we got lucky, we got a bonanza, we can transfer this to the citizens, and they have a fiscal framework, and they say, okay, fine, we can give the citizens $1 million a year, and it gets done. We can't leave it to a politician to do that, because then it gets used for political purposes. And if you pass the law, you will also pass the regulations that determine how this money is going to be distributed, what are the grievance procedures that exist, where do I go if I want to make a complaint, and who is responsible at the end of the day, and most importantly, you have audit procedures. So if you say $60 billion, the auditors go in there and make sure not only was the $60 billion instead of $70 billion distributed, but there is proof that the distribution actually went to those adult citizens and not to the friends and family alone, as we have now. And that is the beginning of what you call a new republic, a new real country. And so, I know I've been going on a bit, but those are some of, I can't say opening because I've been speaking for 20 minutes, sorry, half an hour, but those are some of the matters that I wanted to share with your listeners.
Well, Nigel, and to our viewers out there, Nigel is not no stranger to Burmese. He is from New Amsterdam. And speaking of New Amsterdam, this week here is New Amsterdam Tongue Week, and he was here Thursday night, and he gave a speech, and we have some wonderful people in our municipality of New Amsterdam, who embrace our leader, AFC leader, Nigel, with open arms, and they were very happy that he was here, in his birthplace. And talking about New Amsterdam, Nigel, today, we had a great time today, walking through the New Amsterdam market. And I'm not going to say much because I witnessed everything, but I'll let Nigel speak about it.
So, thank you, Derek. We had a very privileged day today. We walked through the New Amsterdam market, and we were part of our listening and grounding tour that we're doing as the Alliance for Change is that we are going out to all communities in the country, whether it's in the interior, whether it's the indigenous, whether it's in Georgetown, Linden. We're in New Amsterdam today. We've been to the quarantine, and we, of course, just come back from North America, well, the United States of America. And what we're doing is we're actually listening to the Guyanese people and what they say. And in the meeting today, we engaged with not only the people in the market, but more importantly, the vendors. And the number one complaint from all of them, or 99% of them, is that business is slow. Business is slow. And the question is, how can we be making $65 million a day, and the business people, all of them, there's not PPP business people, or PNC business people, or Chinese business people, all of them are complaining that business is slow. When you dug a little deeper, you say, well, all right, what's happening? They say the people are coming through the market, but they ain't got money to spend. They don't have the disposable income. And what they're spending on first is food. So if you're doing dry goods or you're doing something else, you are not a priority. And so that entire market, people are saying, look, the people in New Amsterdam or the people that come to shop in the market don't have the money to be able to buy. Now that's a problem, especially where you have the kind of wealth that Guyana has. The other issue that they complained about was the cost of living. Now, cost of living is directly related to people not having money. If your costs are going up rapidly and your salary is not moving at the same rate, then you're going to have less and less money available to buy, and we all have to eat. So the cost of living, and that's not just in Berbice, it's the same complaint in Georgetown, it's the same complaint in Linden, and I'm sure it's the same complaint to the Cartine. You have to have measures to address that. No, transferring $100,000 to anybody doesn't deal with the cost of living. How does that do? So you spend $100,000, so you go and you buy this week, next week, maybe the week after, and I didn't think $100,000 would last you that long, but assuming it does, how does that deal with what happens in the fourth and fifth week? Now, $100,000 is a difficult sum. You can't really go and buy a piece of equipment you want to put down on a mortgage for a house, or you want to put down on a vehicle, or you want to buy a tool. So if you're a carpenter, you want to go and buy some sort of saw or some electric saw. It is still small. And I was saying to my colleagues today in the party that I'm concerned. $60 billion is going to go from the government to the citizens, and they're going to spend it straight on who? On the BTO businesses. And all that is happening is you're transferring $60 billion from the government to those persons. We have to come up with a plan that says, or recommendations that say to those people who are receiving the $100,000, this is how you begin to invest in it. Now, if you are a carpenter, maybe you could go buy a tool that improves your competitive advantage. If you have 10 people that you trust and you want to look at investing in a business, 10 people at $100,000, $1 million, you might be able to go into a business. But I want to urge all people who are receiving this money to think about investment. If you want to go and buy some chickens and raise them in your yard, if you want to go and probably buy seeds and start a little kitchen garden for commercial purposes or even to reduce your own costs, do it. Do not splurge this money. Because all that will happen is it's moving literally from the government, you will have some very temporary pleasure, and then it goes to the persons who purchase. So, again, a responsible government needs to think about how, if you really want to transfer economic advantage to the people, you have to give it in such a way that they become economically advantaged by it. If they got a business that can, start to put it in something that will see a return. And you have to talk about the people. You have to talk to the people about financial literacy. Just don't leave it to people and say, okay, you got 100,000, go invest. A lot of people don't know how, what is a sensible investment or how they can protect their investment. And if you think about it, if you look at the stats and people who win the lotto in the United States, a lot of them, over 50% in 15 years, are broke. So how do you make $500 million and end up broke in 15 years? It's simply because you don't know. And of course, when you get those large numbers, everybody comes to you and they want a piece and this. And if you're not strong and you're not certain about how you're going to invest, then of course it's going to go. And so we are at a very difficult place. On a larger national scale, Ghana is now very attractive. We're sitting on, they say 11 billion barrels of oil, but if you think about it, we have had 6 discoveries, and this is still 11 billion barrels of oil. That makes sense to you? How can you have new discoveries every 4 to 5 months, and the reserve is still $11 billion. Some international experts in the oil field have pinned it at a minimum of 18 billion barrels of oil. We know that oil has a minimum, well, not a minimum, we got a good 20 years of oil. The question is, if we don't have an economic plan as to how we're going to manage that money and develop the country, that is going to get taken away by people who are smarter than us. Because the people in this oil industry who have been there for years. If you think of Libya, under Gaddafi, Libya moved from being a very rural country with several tribes to being a first world country under Mr. Gaddafi. First world healthcare, first world investment, first world education, and they were the envy of the world. Mr. Gaddafi began to threaten the economic order, and then he got removed. So don't believe that because you suddenly arrive at this status, that you somehow are going to be able to keep it. We are now in a league in which some of the smartest and perhaps some of the most devious people in the world are there. And if we don't have the experts to be able to manage this, we're going to be taken advantage of. And just before I conclude on that, we believe that you should have a National Development Commission. That National Development Commission is going to be responsible for gathering all the data. It's going to look down the road to see what are the potential threats, what are the opportunities for Guyana, and it's going to be driven by the data. So that whichever government gets in and they say, look, I want to build a new railroad to Manaus, and they say, hold on, hang on, the cost of that does not justify the money that we're going to make off of it. And one of the things the Alliances for Change is saying is that we need to put in law that you must have a National Development Commission, and that feasibilities are mandatory. You can't wake up as a politician and have a bright idea and say to the nation, oh, we're going to go build football stadiums in some remote part of the country. It has to be economically justified. So I want to break there. I think you had mentioned that you might open the phone lines.
Viewers out there, I just want to, pick on Nigel a little bit. On the Diaspora will receive Nigel and the team in New York, in Washington, right where, we met with some legislators there, senators and things like that, and also an extended trip to Florida. We just want Nigel to speak about that. And you know why I'm emphasizing on this? Because if you notice, since Nigel become the leader, every Thursday, the vice president is picking on Nigel. Even to the other day, he said, we went to the Diaspora now. And we continue going to go to the Diaspora. But on your trip to New York, Washington, and Florida, which was well received also, with a standing crowd, was limited amount of seats there for people, right in Jamaica, Queens, New York. All right, Nigel, can you speak about that?
Thanks, Derek. We had a very, very successful trip. And one of the things that's sad about the diaspora is that we have lost our best and brightest overseas. When you think of, and you mentioned it, Richmond Hill. The entire Richmond Hill is owned by Guyanese. The entire Richmond Hill.
Little Guyana.
That's probably in a generation. Think of the amount of investment those people made. They left Guyana in rough circumstances and they were able to own a whole block or two in the United States. If you look at universities, heads of various departments, professors, all Guyanese, we have exported our best and brightest. Up to about 2 years ago, I think we were losing 85% of our graduates from university. But what became evident in all of the areas we went to New York, we had 2 meetings there, we went to Washington, D.C., we met the State Department, and we also had a meeting there, and then we went to Florida. What is clear in the diaspora is that there are a lot of people who are very interested in Guyana, want to come back and invest in Guyana, but a lot of them have had awful experiences. And the constant complaint that you get is that if they know somebody, the business flop. So they come back, they want to invest, whether they've been in apartment blocks, they're doing something in oil and gas. All of them complain that they got to either pass a little change, or if they don't know somebody, they ain't gonna make it. And that's where it started. It's about the rule of law. That your investment should not depend on some minister, some head of department. Absolutely not. And they want to invest. So the question is, and we need, as I said, in the oil and gas, we need a lot of skills. So how do we capture and harness those skills from the diaspora first, and then we can look at the wider field? And those were those were the areas in which we concentrated our discussions on with the diaspora. There are a lot of people. I mean, I know Quarantine, for example. Every time I go down Quarantine, I used to come here every Easter and go to 63 Beach and when I was young. Quarantine was a vibrant area. When you drive past Quarantine, now there's so many houses that are closed. People have left. It is sad. And those are people who could have been contributing to the development of the country. You go through West Coast Babis and you see what's happening in Hope Town, Bel Air, all those areas where there's no investment. Actually, I had a really awful experience in Liverpool, I think about 3 weeks ago. At 6 o'clock, I don't know what happened. It's like the whole army of mosquitoes
Yes.
in the whole of Babis suddenly descended upon me. This was not a couple of mosquitoes. Every single person was, all over the place. How do you in 2024, in the wealthiest, fastest growing economy, have a whole village that at 6 o'clock they got to go inside, lock up, close up, and pray to God they don't get dengue, don't get malaria? I mean, are we serious? It's crazy. And during the day before that meeting, we did a walkabout, and the drains are in awful position. The people don't spray. Long ago, when we were still a colony, of course, there were measures. Of course, the chemicals they use might be bad now, but there were measures in place. We reached the stage now where, unbelievable. West Coast with Beast by Falls. I had a puncture maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. If you stand up outside the car, the mosquitoes will physically pick you up. They'll change the tire for you and then take you away.
Yeah.
Unbelievable stuff. But anyway, I see your phone's going.
Yeah. Well, let it ring back again. But, viewers out there, I do wear another hat also as an RDC counselor. And what Nigel was talking about is mosquitoes. I brought it up on numerous occasions in our statutory monthly meeting. And, there's nothing being done. You hardly hear, they say, we got a caller here. Let's take this call. Caller, you live on the air?
Good night, sir.
Good night.
Good night, Mr. Nigel.
Good evening, sir.
I want to clarify something. I see the president in a Brooklyn and then protest her, protest him.
Sorry, I didn't hear that at all. All I heard you say was, I see the president something. I didn't hear anything else.
I see the president went in Brooklyn, New York,
Uh-huh.
and people protest him.
Uh-huh.
I want to know if that is true.
Yeah, there were, I saw, let me say this, I saw videos where there were protests outside of, I think, a restaurant where the president was in the morning. I've seen the videos, but I wasn't there, so I can't confirm, but I did see the videos.
Okay.
Is there a question? Or was that your question? Sorry?
Just that I want to find out.
Oh,
Thank you, caller.
sure.
Yes, viewers out there. As I was saying, with the mosquito situation, there is nothing like fogging. Because sometimes you see, the last time I saw a truck pass around with fogging, probably about 2 months ago. And mosquito season is coming on again. And it's not the rainy weather, right? Mr. Nigel was talking about, agriculture, right? Caller, you live on the air?
Hello? Hi. Good night, Basil.
Yes,
How are you?
I'm all right.
Well, let me tell you something, right? You know going on in this country? Cost of living. I go and buy the bread. It's $3.40. What these people do in this country, eh?
420.
Pardon?
420 I paid.
$3.40 for bread.
Wow.
The cost of living is so high. And you know these people then? $100,000 is only 3 buckets, friends. Good.
Yeah.
Listen to that. My name is Sukram Jawahir. New. They can't do me nothing. Good.
Okay, caller.
People. My name is New Sukram Jawahir. Good.
Okay.
3 buckets, friends, is $75,000. What I exporting up to any kind of friends. I'm telling you what's going on in this country is everybody. I'm a businessman. And business is so rough. People say they don't have money. But scared to Georgetown, I'm doing business.
Okay.
Who like me, like me. Who don't like me, I don't care. Like Barack Jardine said. The president said, something that I don't care about happening 1 year. Yes, sir. Good.
All right.
And these people must understand why I'm talking, man.
All right, caller. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Cost of living, you know what you bread, you know what you rent, $2,500 per bag.
And our pensioners only getting $26,000 a month. Just imagine.
Is 15 days?
Definitely not.
15 days, definitely I'm talking. Good.
Okay, caller. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Good.
Okay. Yes, you heard our last caller. Cost of living. Same thing what Nigel was saying, and everybody out there knows that cost of living is very high. You know, whole wheat bread is $420. Like I bought that last night.
It is. We have to find creative ways to bring down the cost. If you just keep putting more money in the system, all you can do is drive up the prices. So we got to find creative ways for bringing down the cost. Another call, sorry.
Yeah. Caller, you live on the air. Yes, we just lost that caller, but okay. Caller, you live on the air.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. I
Good
just
evening,
have
ma'am.
one question. More so I need a little bit of clarification. Why is it that I'm working? I pay PAY, which is pay as you earn. This is tax on the money that I am earning, that I work for. But yet when I go to the stores, I pay back tax again on the same money that I was already taxed on. And I've raised this person with GRA and nobody could answer me. I feel like I'm being taxed 2 and 3 times, and then when it comes to clearance of April, I cannot claim back for this tax. I can't bring my receipts from the grocery stores and try to get back some money.
Okay. So the government, before we found oil and up to now, has to generate income. And the way they generate income, remember the government does not make money. The government, it taxes you. So you have income tax, that was one source of income, and value-added tax, which is VAT. Now, I agree with you, when you go to buy something in value-added tax, you're using your already taxed dollar to pay more tax. The concept behind value-added taxes was to kind of level the playing field, because a lot of people didn't pay PAYE, a lot of people were outside of the system, and so they thought by bringing in value-added tax, everybody got to go to the supermarket, everybody got to go and buy. That's why it got implemented. Now, you're right, you're paying income tax and you're also paying value-added tax, but it really is it's an income-generating measure by the government. Now, the government, to succeed to deliver the services that you want, before we had oil, roads, electricity, all these things have to get money from somewhere. So they got to get it from a tax system. And one of the proposals, I mean, again, the Alliance for Change has, we would reduce income tax from where it is at 25 and probably take it to somewhere like 15%, and probably use VAT as a basis for recovering tax from a broader set of people. But the short answer to you is that the government does that, and it's not just value-added tax and income tax. You pay excise tax, you pay stamp duty. The government has different ways. So every time you pay 100,000, you got to get revenue stamps. It's just different ways for the government to raise money. And you've got to remember, before oil in 2015, sugar was losing money. It was a foreign currency earner, but it wasn't making a profit. When the European market got removed, it was gold that became our major foreign currency earner. So the government had to raise money to be able to keep all the government services going. And so taxes, various taxes, import tax, customs and excise, duties, all of those are a means by which the government raises money to be able to perform the functions and duties that they do.
Okay, caller. Yes, viewers out there, we are accepting calls tonight, so you're free to call, and we have, our leader here who will answer all your questions. Calling live on air.
Good evening, Mr. you and FD.
Good evening,
Good
sir.
evening.
Could you tell me on your program? Could you tell me very soon I will see you and Mr. Martin? Mr. Martin, everybody making
And what statement would that be, sir?
coalition.
Okay. Thank you for affording me an opportunity to explain where the Alliance for Change is. The Alliance for Change believes, that at the end of the day, for the benefit of Guyana, we can have as many people involved in some sort of political coalition to run the government. However, we have to be, the party has to be realistic. After 2020 elections, the party was not in the best shape that it was in. And so when I was privileged enough to be elected in July, I said the first thing the Alliance for Change has to do is it has to rebuild confidence of its former supporters. It has to rebuild trust of the electorate, and we have to become a viable political movement which people believe can actually manage the country. We said that we are going to be spending the next 5-6 months on building the party and being able to demonstrate to the people of Guyana that the Alliance for Change has looked at its missteps, looked at its errors, and it has now rebuilt its strength because it's on a new path. That was very fundamental to what I said. We had, and we're still in the process of examining internally some of the mistakes we made, because the only way you can move forward as a political party is to look at the mistakes that you made. You take measures to make sure you don't repeat them, and you do that by a series of internal examinations, and also speaking to former members, former ministers, to get their views, and also, most importantly to me, is the feedback you get from the people in the society about what they think about the Alliance on the move, Alliance for Change, sorry. And so that is what we have been doing. I have never said that we were not going to a coalition. We get this question all the time, whether it's in Guyana, whether it's in the United States of America. What I've said is, at the moment, this is what we're concentrating on. And we really don't want to get into a game where we're talking about coalitions, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to get there, absolutely. We're going to have to deal with that when it comes. But right now, we are working on rebuilding the party. As you know, for a lot of people, it was an Alliance for Change member who voted and brought the government down. We have suffered damage as a result of that. There are people who believe that we are responsible for it. So there's a lot of work that we have to do. There are people in the party who felt that we were not necessarily providing the best representation when we were in government. And so all those issues have to be examined to make sure that we don't repeat those errors. And so, sir, I understand where you're going, but I'm just saying at the present moment, what we're doing is trying to rebuild the Alliance for Change.
Calling live on air.
Right, Mr. Martin, how are you?
I'm all right.
Right, Mr. Youth, welcome to work.
Good night, thank you. You tell me welcome back home. But anyway, thank you.
My reason for calling, the cash grant. I think that $1 million for households should be quite sufficient. Could you please shine a light on that for us, please?
Okay.
I need to see you in Burbis more often.
Thank you. Here's what I say about that. I don't want to pick a figure because it depends on the economic impact and if we could afford it. I don't know what $1 billion does to the Natural Resources Fund. That's why our proposal was you get the economists and they tell you what's best. $1 million has a cash value. $1 million has a percentage of the Natural Resource Fund. And you have to also decide at the time that you're going to give the $1 million whether it's the optimal economic time in the country. Now, I fully believe, I don't believe in the trickle-down theory. I fully believe that the resources that we get from this bonanza of oil should be transferred through different means to the citizen. But whether $1 million or some less, some more, I personally would defer to the experts, the economists, to tell me whether it makes sense. So I'm sorry I can't say to you that, yes, I agree $1 million, because I don't think it's just a figure. I think it's a process, and everybody has to have confidence in that process, and the process has to say this is the right time for that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure, thank you, sir.
Yes, viewers out there, we are taking live calls, and here we go. Caller, you live on the air.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
I welcome you to Borbies.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. There's a problem I asked. When the PPP took office, they promised that if you build a house, they'll give material. I sent in my documents to Fort Wellington, and I want to know, nobody has responded to me. I also spoke to Court Ali. He came to Warbies, and he put a guy to look after the matter. And I am a pensioner, 74 years of age, and want to know, nobody has responded to me. And I can't see you making a promise and you can't fulfill your promise.
Sir, I could give you the very smart political answer is, you know how to vote next time, right? But that's not quite what you want to hear, I suspect. I didn't hear exactly what the issue is, but I think what you were saying is that there were certain things that were promised in the manifesto that you didn't get, and but the details I didn't quite hear, so I don't know if Basil could help.
I think you was asking about, like you go to the RDC and you put in for your cement, your steel rods, and that's the question?
Yes, you carry your house value, or your transport copy and so on. I did that, and I want to know, nobody's responded to me. And if you make a promise, and it's there, how do people get?
Well, the other people I get, it's the same thing that circle all over the place. Friends, family, favorites, and flatterers. They got everything, even the contracts.
Yeah, but that's not fair.
Not fair, definitely not fair. And I feel for you. You made your application, you're supposed to be having some word if you qualify or not.
Yeah, guy came there, the president said speak to him, and I did that. And I want to know, he says he gets after me. It's like I doubted the country.
Try back again.
Yeah, I was going to say, sir, I'm really sorry that has been your experience, but you need to continue to pursue that. But that comes down to a question of the structure and the system they have, which unfortunately is inadequate. I think we're drawing close to 9 o'clock, huh? I agree.
Okay. All right, caller.
We got to wrap up. It's like a minute.
Yeah. Viewers out there, we are indeed pressed for time. And, to conclude, we'll let Mr. Nigel, our AFC leader, say and take up the necessary time here for closing.
Well, I just want to say, Basil, thank you very much. And to the people at DTV, you've been most kind to allow me an opportunity to speak to the people of Berbice. I will say this. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build a real, fair, equitable, just society that is stable. First time. And we have enough money. The money is not the issue. So all the old grievances that we have the means in which we can begin to address it. And if we mess this up on this occasion, because we've messed up on several occasions before, then we only have ourselves to blame. So I say to you as we go forward, let us all get involved. We have to build a new Guyana in which all of us have a fair chance and an equitable opportunity to participate and benefit from all this country has to offer. Good night, and thank you very much.
Good night, and thank you. We'll tune in next Saturday, same time, for Alliance on the Move program. Thank you.